So now I'm going to answer about the last question. So the Russia and the Ukraine conflict is one of the most significant international crises of the 21st century. It has raised questions about state sovereignty, military power, economic and interests, and global governance. Different international relations theories provide different explanations for why the conflict started and how it affects global security. So, background of Russia Ukraine conflict. The tensions between Russia and Ukraine have deep historical and political roots. A cause of the conflict is firstly the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 and Ukraine became an independent state. Secondly, Russia has always viewed Ukraine as a part of its sphere of influence. Thirdly, in 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, claiming it was protecting Russia-speaking people. In 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, leading to a major war. So, key players in the conflict: Ukraine fighting to defend its sovereignty and independence. Russia claims it is protecting its national security against NATO expansions, and NATO and the EU, a European nation, supporting Ukraine through sanctions and military aid. This background sets the stage for how different theories interrupt of the war. So, how different international relations theories explain the conflict. So each theory offers a different perspective and also on the cause dynamics and global impact of the war. And firstly, realism, power politics and security concerns. So realists believe that states act in self-interest to survive. Russia sees NATO expansions as a threat and is acting to protect its security, and Ukraine is fighting for a survival as a state. And for example, the Cold War, the United States and Soviet Union competed for power in the same way. So realism explains the conflict as a struggle for power and security, where military force and necessary to protect national interests. So, secondly, liberalism, the role of institutions and diplomacy. So, liberals argue that international cooperation and institutions help prevent wars. So, the failure of diplomacy negotiations between Russia, Ukraine, and the West lead to a war. So, the UN, NATO, and the European nation are trying to stop the war through sanctions and diplomacy. For example, the European Union's role maintaining peace among its members. So, liberalism sees the conflict as a failure of international cooperation in basing diplomatic solutions and economic measures. So, thirdly, Marxism, economic interests and capitalist rivalry. Marxists believe that the war happens because of economic inequality and capitalism. Russia and the West are fighting over economic control of Ukraine, including energy resources. And multinational corporations and Western economic also have an interest in Ukraine resources. For example, the role of oil and gas. Russia uses energy as a weapon against Europe. So, Marxism sees the war as a part of global struggle and economic power between capitalist elites. Fourthly, the English school, international society and norms. The English school argues that there is an international society with shared rules. Russia is violating international norms by invading a sovereign country. So, the West is responding with sanctions and military aid to enforce international rules. For example, the United Nations Charter protects the sovereignty of all states. Also, the English school explains that the war is a violation of global norms where the international community must react. So, and also feminist theory, the role of gender and social impact. Feminist international relations highlights how war affects different genders and social groups. Women and children in Ukraine are suffering the most, facing displacement, violence, and economic hardship. The role of women in diplomacy and peace negotiations is often ignored. For example, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda at the UN calls for more female leadership in peace building. So, feminist international relations focuses on the human impact of war, not just political and military aspects. So, the broader global implications of the conflict. This war is not just about Russia and Ukraine, it affects the entire world. Impact on global security. NATO is expanding and strengthening its defense strategy. So, also, Russia is becoming more aggressive, raising fears of larger war. And also, countries like China and Iran are watching closely, which could impact the future conflicts. Economic consequences. Energy prices have risen due to the sanctions of Russia, oil and gas, and also global supply chains have been, I think, disrupted, affecting food and trade, and Western countries are increasing military spending. And humanitarian crisis. Firstly, millions of Ukraine refugees have fled to Europe, and also war crimes and human rights violations are being investigated by the International Criminal Court. So, the conflict has changed global security, economic, and human rights policies. And in conclusion, the Russia-Ukraine war is a complex conflict that can be explained using a different international relations theories. Realism sees that it's a power struggle over security. Liberalism argues it's a failure of diplomacy and institutions. Marxism focuses on economic interests and capitalist rivalry. And the English school sees it as a violation of international norms. And fifth, feminist theory highlights the human and gendered impact of war. So, the conflict is a race-shaping is reshaping global politics and raising questions about security, diplomacy, and international law. By analyzing it through different theories, we gain a deeper understanding of war, peace, and power in the modern world. Thank you for watching. This was the answers for the 10th questions.